Hi, welcome back to this second section in our course about Christian ethics of sport and competition, what we call Christmanship. I'm Dr. Greg Linville, and this is with the Agone Institute of Sports Ministry. And this video training series will help us understand some of the foundations to a theology of competition and to the ethics that we need to go into. Some of this is in our class on the theology of competition, and some of this is a repeat. All of our classes, there's 10 or 15% that's kind of a review, 10 or 15% that's a preview, and then the core is that 70 to 80% of the uniqueness. So some of this right now is a little bit of review of you that may have taken some courses, or a preview of courses for some of you that haven't yet taken those courses. Depends on where you're on the cycle. If you're taking it for class credit, for your master's degree or other, you've got to take exam quality notes. That means you've got to have your own integration of thought, not just fill in blanks. And if you're taking it for our certification or anything else, just make sure that we know that you've been watching this and that you are familiar with these terms and what we're doing. This time, we're talking about the overview of competition. Last time, we talked about the overview of theology. Now we're going to go deeper into that competition side. So as you look at your second slide in what has been given to you, you're going to see that there's an overarching principle or concept of which there are subpoints coming off of it. Competition is the overarching. The individual things down below are representations of that. And many people think that competition and sport are the exact same thing. They're not. Sport is one manifestation of competition. The others are politics, business, economics, even love. I competed for my wife, and I'm certainly glad that I won that competition. And all of these things are part or a manifestation of competition. So in your notes, you'll see a note there by Thomas Aquinas, and I'm going to read it for you. First, do not take pleasure in indecent or injurious play. Second, do not lose your mental or emotional balance and self-control. Third, do not play in ways ill-fitting either the hour or the man. Play should have positive moral and other consequences. So, as Arthur Holmes discusses that about what the great Saint Thomas Aquinas, and he was a great thinker, understood, this gives us kind of a foundation for where we're going. Now, grab hold of the next slide or set of slides that has a pie, and we're going to start to put pieces of the pie in. This is what we call the competition grid. The first one you're going to see is playful games. These playful games are just kids that are just playing. Today I was with my dear grandson, and we just had Legos, and some of them were Batman, and some of them were Robin, and some of them were just all these things that we were playing with. And there was no competition. We just played. Playful games. If you go to your next slide, you're going to see sequential. These are activities that somebody does it and then somebody else does it. Somebody jumps and then the next guy jumps. Somebody throws something and then somebody else throws something. And curling is a sequential, where you get on the ice and you curl the rock down the ice, and one team goes after the other. These are sequential. The next one is what we call simultaneous. Simultaneous is when you do the same event side by side. Swimming races, foot races. These kind of, I'm not quite sure what they call them in the Winter Olympics, but they're side by side skiing down the mountain. And these are simultaneous, doing the same event on the same basic course side by side. Now you come to the fourth one, we see team sport and activity. Rugby, cricket, football, baseball. These are all team sports that one team has a ball and then the other team has a ball, and they're kind of a combination of sequential, simultaneous together, but they're team sports. And then we have challenges. These are often called sports like motor racing sports, motor sports, or hunting or fishing are called sports. These are activities or challenges. And where some of the motor sports are sequential or simultaneous or simultaneously sequential, that some of that is, but a lot of this is not even necessarily competing with another person, like hunting and fishing. And then, as we mentioned before, there's just others in this competition grid. Business, marriage, politics. Okay, now that you have all those pie shapes in, let's take a look at this. On the upper kind of left-hand side of your circle there, you're going to see that this is what we call athletics. It takes not only an intellect and an understanding, it's not just activity, but it actually takes some physical might, strength, quickness. Those that are taller, stronger, quicker, faster, more agile, these are the people that have an advantage on that side. On the other side, we have what's called activities. Now, it's not to say that somebody that drives a motor racer around laps for 500 laps doesn't have to have some physical fitness. And they certainly have some dexterity, and they have some hand-eye coordination and reflexes and reactions. But there's not a lot of those people that could compete as a lineman in the NFL because they don't have that size or they don't have that strength and power. So I think you get an idea of why we say on one side is athletics and one side is activities. Now you come to that 12th slide and we get into what we call the progressive levels of intensity. Progressive levels of intensity, what we call the PILs. And you start at the bottom with play, playful games, move all the way up through pro. Now, play is just, as I mentioned with my grandson, sandbox activity. This is just where you get in the sand and you just start playing. Then it moves up to playful games. And many parents, this is where they first come into the understanding that their kids are competitive. They were down in the sand, they were playing, and then, oh, isn't that cute? They're building sandcastles side by side. And then all of a sudden, the little brother is crying because the big sister has kicked the sandcastle over, or vice versa, the big sister's castle has been kicked over by the little brother. What happened? Well, competition. My castle is better than yours. Or I could build my castle quicker than you did, or taller, or wider, or whatever. And suddenly, what was a very wonderful, peaceful day at the beach has become a family row. Why? Competition. And then we move up to games. So you say, all right, that's enough, we're going home, we're off the beach, and you go home and you start to play board games, or you start to play kick the can, or something else out in the backyard. And these childhood games of tag, or whatever it is, Red Rover, all these different games that kids play, they become competitive. And again, there's somebody that ends in tears. Now we move from just having a board game where I'm moving men around the Monopoly board or armies around the Risk board, and now I'm actually into some kind of athletics. I can jump farther than you can. I can throw. I can tackle. And athletic, the physical presence, it's not just a board game, but now we're in a game that we have to use our bodies. And then we move from there to what we call sport. And for me, the differentiation is that whereas athletics can be individual contests like running, jumping, throwing, sport is combining the games and athletics. And it's usually pitting teams together against each other. And then you move to what we call varsity. And this is when you're playing for a high school or a collegiate level or maybe a club team. And that this is, you may or may not be getting paid for it, but even collegiate athletes are getting lots of money. When this is being filmed, there are universities that it costs upwards to $150,000 to go to that school. Times 4, you're over $500,000. Somebody's getting a lot of money to play sport for a university. And so even those kind of people we would consider pro. A middle school coach that's getting paid is a professional. Now, what does all this have to do? It has to do with the fact that the progressive intensity levels of competition, you can begin to see how each level up causes people to maybe want to compete a little harder. Now, and may we say, maybe even want to cheat? And we start talking about the ethics of competition very quickly, the higher up the level. Influences. As you go to that next slide, you're going to see the internal and the external. The internal motivation of competition, the internal motivations, and the external motivations. And you see some of those are internally your faith. Can this be worship and honoring of God? Absolutely. Christmanship ethics, all these are positive. Self-worth, self-pride, self-meaning can be, maybe not. They can lead to some negative things. External, you see the list there that you have. It comes from other people, comes from issues, comes from money and fame. Now, what I want to do is I want to put these on a chart. Here's the internal influences on competition. And down the middle, you see those different steps going up. That's the PIL, from playful games to varsity and pro. And then on the left-hand side, you see when it gets to be negatives. And then on the right side, you see how it gets to be positives. And so a negative one would be that there's little, just a little bit of influence. Negative 2 would be moderate negative influence. Level 3 would be major, maximum influence. And so we give these weights, 1, 2, and 3. Now you can see that faith and worship of Christ and trained in Christmanship should never have a negative. But some of those ego needs could. Those other two could have only positives. Okay, so those are the internal. Now you look at the external and you have the same thing. Negative or positive. Am I going to get rewarded for this? And that could be a positive, it could be a negative. What do my other people say? My coach, my teammates, my parents, other people. What do the papers say? What do the pundits say? Negative, positive. And then those issues like gender and patriotism, school loyalty, rivalries. These are the kinds of things that could go either way. Now, what we can do is we can take and put those numbers on what we call a volatility scale. The volatility scale has 4 quadrants in it. You see the PIL going up the middle from 0 to 7, playful games up to pro, and then you can see from left, going left, up to negative 25. There's no limit there really. It could go as high as you have negative external influences. And then on the right side, it's positive, and those could be external or internal on either side, and they give you pluses or minuses. And so then you first of all say, okay, we're at level 4 or 5, that we've moved up into those athletics and sport. Now, are there more things on the positive side of the IMIC and the EMIC than it's on the right side of the graph? Or if there's less and there's more negative, then it goes on the left side. And you can tell very quickly which zone you're going to be in. The enjoyment zone means this is playful games, nobody's keeping score, we're just having fun, falling down, laughing. The exasperation zone is nobody's keeping score and somebody's willing to kill me over this. I mean, it's just like completely ridiculous. The explosion zone is when there's more negative than positives on those I mix and E mix, the external and internal motivation factors. And it takes it in an area where fights break out, where cursing happens, where all kinds of negativity happens. Unfortunately, most of us have been there at some time or another. The encounter zone can still be positive. That's why it's still green, but it's moving towards yellow, because we have to decide, are we going to keep things positive or not? All right, now, as I wrap this up, this is in part of your book, Christmanship, and you can go back, and if you've missed something here from this particular talk, you can pick it up in the book. But here's the thing I want you to remember here in the Agone Institute, is that there is such a thing as progressive intensities of competition, levels of competition, and there are external and internal influences. And you, as a person who has decided to follow Christ, you who are studying to go into sports ministry, need to understand this and try to create redemptive attitudes and actions amongst yourself and amongst everybody else, and also in the whole experience, creating the environments that can move us into that positive encounter zone. I'm Dr. Greg Linville for the Agone Institute of Sports Ministry. Thanks for joining me.